Hello there, and thank you for taking part in the BTEC Tech Awards training, the Getting Started training for the BTEC Construction. My name is Phil Holmes. I'm an experienced head of department in art design and construction. I've been head of department for the last 10 years. I work as a lead examiner, a standards verifier, team leader on a range of different BTECs and the T level. I've been involved in the BTEC Tech Awards course through writing the assignments, writing the exams and so on. And I also work as a GCSE examiner moderator, which has come in really useful for this particular course because we're now moving more towards a moderation style. So having that overview of how the GCSE works and how the BTEC Tech Award is moving towards has been really useful. During this meeting, our aim for the session is to look at some of the key qualification purposes and some of the changes from the previous qualification, have a bit of an overview of the qualification structure. We'll look at some of the internal assessments and what the Pearson set assignment briefs are and how they're marked, how the moderation process will take place. I'll review the resubmissions and retakes. We'll look at some of the external assessment details and how that may have changed. We'll look at the grading qualifications. When these assessments will be available, I'll offer you some delivery models that you might want to use, how you might want to run your resets, and some general timeline information towards the end of the presentation. So what are the BTEC Tech Awards? Well, the BTEC Tech Awards are a broad range of level 1-2 qualifications that are designed for Key Stage 4 learners in schools in England and Northern Ireland to study alongside GCSEs. They've been designed to equip students with applied knowledge not normally taught through GCSEs, so a much more hands-on vocational type of learning to give them a taste of a particular sector. They are the same size as a GCSE and they do lead on to progression into Key Stage 5 post-16 studies, and they have been designed to meet the DfE's latest guidance for technical Key Stage 4 qualifications. The majority of the Tech Awards are eligible for open pot groups for Progress 8. We have had to redevelop our BTEC Tech Awards because in 2020 the Department of Education published technical guidance for Key Stage 4 qualifications, and at that time, for most of you that are coming from the BTEC First in construction, it wasn't meeting that technical guidance. Therefore, we've had to modify the courses to meet those needs. We do have a whole range of BTEC courses, and if you're in a centre that's running a range of courses, you may be delivering some of these already. All of these BTEC Tech Awards are Progress 8, with the exception of engineering. It has gone through for approval with the DfE, but has not been approved as a Progress 8 course. So all of the courses in front of you there are Progress 8 compliant, with exception of engineering. So moving on to our own course. It is a 3-component course, like the majority of the Tech Awards. Component 1 is your construction technology, which you'll recognise being fairly similar to the old BTEC First Award exam. 48 guided learning hours followed up by a 1.5-hour exam. Weighting of it is 40% with 60 marks available, and the students will be able to sit that exam twice in a year series. Component 2 is our construction practice. This is the one where they're doing the vocational practical skills. 30% of the overall course, marked out as 60 marks. Teaching and learning would take around 36 hours. And it is based on Pearson set assignment briefs, which I'll talk more about later. It has 8 guided learning, 8 learning supervised hours for the actual assessment. Again, it can be released twice per year. And component 3 is our construction and design. It's 36 hours worth of guided learning, followed up by a 8-hour monitored and supervised session. I'll talk more about how that's broken down a little bit later. 30% of the final course, and it is worth 60 marks in total, and there will be two releases of the Pearson set assignment briefs. We'll look at each of these different components in more details and what this grid means in more detail as we go through the presentation. Bit of information about some of the changes. We are now using what is called a Pearson set assignment brief. These replace what you would be commonly used to as authorised assignment briefs or internally set assignments. These Pearson set assignments are set on vocational scenarios. They are broken down into tasks, and the students can complete the task at the highest level and will be able to achieve the highest marks. However, Below that, they should fall out to lower levels. So if it's a task set at the highest level, they will test the same skills on each Pearson set assignment. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. However, the context of the assignment may change. They must be used. You cannot use your own authorised assignment briefs anymore. You cannot modify Pearson set assignment briefs. You must use the Pearson set assignment briefs as they are released without any changes or amendments. The mark schemes are being replaced learning aims. They will have a mark band structure, which I'll give some more details in a minute. This is now compensatory. What I mean by that is, in the past, where students have been able to get a merit on one section of assignment and a pass on another section of assignment, and the pass would then limit the overall grade. Well, now it's compensatory. They may be able to do really well on one part of assignment, they do quite poorly on another part of assignment, but they will balance each other out, and the higher grade will obviously raise the grade overall. So it's a more compensatory, fairer system to the students. We will be providing some more marker training later in the year, which you can find access to on the Pearson Gateway, with dates and times of different training for marking and moderation. So the internal components and Pearson set assignment briefs. I will now look at the different components. We'll look at what learning aims are. I'll give an overview of the tasks and the types of tasks that they may be asked to do, the timings, how you would actually be expected to maintain control and assess those assignments, and how you need to secure and manage the assessment. I'm going to start with component 2. Component 2 is where we will be asking the learners to apply vocationally correct techniques. Like I said, this is the practical component. Okay, there's some written work that will be required, but it is largely the practical vocational component, and we'll expect the students to show the use of an appropriate range of tools and performing construction activities. We're also expecting the students to be able to work safely, and we're also expecting the students to be able to analyse hazards and risks through the use of a risk assessment. This component 2 is only for brickwork or carpentry. It is broken down into learning aims, and there will be 2 learning aims for this component. The first learning aim is about understanding hazards and risks for the production of a practical construction outcome, and learning aim B will be about being able to actually produce that practical outcome. As an example of some of the things that they will be expected to do, there on the left hand side of the screen you can now see a risk assessment template that would meet the requirements for learning aim A. The risk assessment template is provided in the Pearson set assignment brief, although you can use your own risk assessment template if you wish. However, it must meet the same criteria as the Pearson version. The risk assessment template is also matched up with a risk matrices. As you can see, this risk assessment is in more detail than the previous BTEC First Award risk assessments. I will show you an example of an assignment brief in a second, so you can see how that fits into the overall task. On the right hand side at the top, you can see an example of one of the timber-based tasks. This particular task is taken from the sample Pearson set assignment brief. Now, we're now saying that the skills that were being tested are always going to be the same, but the context may change. This is a good example of that. The Pearson set assignment brief has this particular sample version, has this frame in the assignment. There is a live version of the Pearson set assignment that is available to download for the students to complete at the moment. You'll see that the timber frame measurements, overall dimensions, are identical. However, on the live version, some of the joint types have moved or changed. So we are still testing the same skills, and the assignment is similar, but they are not identical. So you can't just do the sample version and submit that. They will have to use the sample version maybe as a practice version, and then do exactly what is outlined in the Pearson set assignment. It's the same situation for the bottom right brick wall. The brick wall that you see there is taken from the sample Pearson set assignment brief, whereas the brick wall that is displayed in one of the live Pearson set assignment briefs has the overall same dimensions. However, the brick pattern and brick features in the centre of the wall are actually different. Students are required to do a different pattern. So they could use the sample version as a practice, and then they would have to complete the Pearson set assignment to exactly the same patterns when they do it for real. Component 2, as I've said, it is expected that it will take 36 hours approximately to deliver the content for component 2, followed up by 8 hours supervised time. It is 30% of the overall mark, and it is marked out of 60 marks. What do I mean by formal supervised time? Well, formal supervision, it is estimated, so if the students go slightly over or slightly under, that's fine. It's not a fixed 8 hours, but it is formally supervised. So during this period of time, the learners must work independently, and they cannot have access to the internet. They cannot work or discuss their work with other students. There is the rider at the end of that sentence that says, unless it is collaborative work. This is more relevant to performing arts rather than construction. We wouldn't expect them to be working in collaboration on one of the construction assignments. You are, during this time, not allowed to support or feedback to the students. The work must be held securely. We're not expecting you to do this in a one solid 8-hour session. You might be breaking it up into 2-hour or 1-hour sessions. If you are, then between each session, that work must be held securely so the students cannot gain access to it and it is locked away. You need to make provisions for that. And then you must make sure that the learners have access to all materials required to complete the tasks. So there is that period of time when the Pearson set assignment brief is released to the centres. You'll want to take a short period of time before allowing the students to have the assignment to ensure that your centre is fully stocked up with the material resource for the students to complete it. Before I move on to component 3, I'd want to take a short break from looking at my PowerPoint to move over to an example of one of the Pearson set assignment briefs. So this is an example of one of the highest marking pieces of work. You can actually download this from the Pearson website, and it gives you the Pearson set assignment brief. Here it is, and you'll see that the layout is very similar to the previous Pearson set assignment briefs, to the previous assignment briefs, in the fact that it has the date and timing outlined on it, the vocational context is there, it highlights the tasks that students are actually expected to complete, for example, the risk assessment and the practical outcome, followed up with some examples of the types of things that they would need to do. Now, for component 2, there is not a complete set of exemplar work available due to the fact that component 2 is the practical assignment. However, this will become available around about February time of 2023 once the first version of this assignment has been fully run through. But there is some work available on the website, as you can see here for the students to be able to download and use it as a sentence to use as an example. Within that, there is also some marking grids. So there are some marking templates that you can use to support you when marking the student work and assessing the accuracy of the practical work that they've completed. There's a template used for the brickwork, and there are also some templates used for the joinery work that you can actually use to support marking of their work. I'm just going to go back to my original PowerPoint. Moving on to component 3. Component 3 is the design component, where the students will be expected to create a developed design brief. So they are looking at doing some form of design brief, and then generate a concept idea to meet the client's needs. The ideas will have to fit in with either a traditional building style within a locality, or could be a more modern contemporary idea. The concepts are developed into a final design solution and can utilise a number of different graphic communication methods. So a couple of key differences there from the BTEC first. No longer are we asking the students to complete a section of this assignment that looks at the construction industry in general. Okay, we're jumping straight into an actual vocational scenario. The second thing we're not looking for the students to do anymore is to produce 2-point perspective drawings. We're opening that up for the students to display the graphical communication that they feel is the best types of graphical communication to show their design. So they have a little bit more freedom in the types of designs that they're doing. This assignment is split down into 2 learning outcomes. We have learning outcome A, understanding the needs of the clients. So this is where the students are going to produce that client brief. And it is specifically around low-rise buildings. So we won't be asking the students to look at mid or high-rise buildings. It will always be low-rise buildings. However, a difference here from the BTEC First to the BTEC Tech Award is that we're not actually restricting this to residential buildings anymore. There is a sample assignment brief that does have residential buildings. However, one of the first live Pearson set assignment briefs actually looks at retail. So we will be varying the context. So what we're expecting from the students' outcomes will be the same, as in the written detail, the client brief and the drawings. However, the context may change. Again, learning aim B is looking at graphical communication of that low-rise building. What we will be expecting these learners to produce will be a client brief. So they should have a client brief that analyses that information that they will have collected, and I'll share an example of that with you in a second. And they should also, for task 2, have practical skills in sketching and projecting, and we were expecting between 2 and 3 sketches. Unlike the old BTEC Tech Award, BTEC First Award, the Tech Award now doesn't define whether they produce 2 and get a pass, 3 and get a merit, 4 and get a distinction. It says that the students need to produce 2 to 3 sketches, and those sketches need to clearly communicate the design. So a student may produce 2 very high quality sketches that very clearly communicate the design, and they could use that to achieve the full score on this assignment. However, they could produce 3 sketches that don't clearly show the design and end up scoring quite lowly. So it's not a case of hit the right amount of numbers to get the grade. Now it's about the quality of those drawings and how clearly they communicate it. Component 3 is expected it will take 36 hours to teach the guided learning. It is worth 30% of the final course, and it is worth 60 marks. It is internal synoptic, so it is expected that the students will have to have completed all the learning before they're able to complete the assignment. It is based on the Pearson set assignment brief, so that will be issued at 2 points throughout a year. And it is 8 hours in total. 2 of those hours are monitored prep time, and 6 of those hours are supervised. And I'll explain what I mean by monitored prep and supervised. So monitored preparation time, this is a 2-hour period of time that the students will have access to the internet and can create notes and diagrams that they feel will support them during the 6 hours supervised time. It doesn't have to happen within the teaching environment. It can be outside of the classroom. So for example, the current Pearson set assignment is based around retail and retail of a coffee shop. You may feel it would be appropriate to take the students to some sort of coffee shop so they can kind of immerse themselves in that environment, getting themselves ready for completing an assignment based on a coffee shop. All the prep materials that the students produce must be checked and authenticated as the learners work. All of those materials must be checked prior to the formal supervision, and they must be made available to the students during that formal supervised time. There's a list of things that are and are not allowed within that monitored preparation material. For example, the students could not go into the 6 hours with a fully completed drawing and design that they are then just going to copy verbatim into the assignment that they submit. But they may want to put things like small graphic detail about how to draw walls and windows that they may want to use as part of a bigger design. That would be okay. I recommend that you check the course specification because it does outline very clearly what is and is not allowed on those preparatory notes. Formal supervision for this particular activity, well, it is the same as for the joinery activity. It's 6 hours formally supervised, which is an estimated amount of time. So if they go over or under, that is fine. However, it is formally supervised, so the students during this period of time must work independently. They must not have access to the internet, and they cannot discuss their work with others. Just as per component 2, if you are breaking this down into a number of different sessions, then their work must be held securely between sessions so they can't have access to it. Learners should have access to their material they produced during their monitored preparation time. It has been questioned whether the students are allowed to complete their drawings using computer-aided design software. The answer to that is unfortunately they're not. Computer-aided design software is more and more increasingly being cloud-based, which means the students would have access to the internet during that 6 hours, which they're not allowed. Therefore, the drawings must be hand-drawn drawings. I'm just going to stop the presentation for 1 second while I move over to an example of the particular assignment. So this piece of work is what has been deemed as a high marked piece of work. It is based upon the example Pearson set assignment brief that is available on the Pearson website. To start out with, I'll move through to the assignment brief. You can see again it matches fairly similarly to what you would be used to as an assignment brief. It has the tasks. Now on task 1, this is the client brief task. It clearly outlines a number of bullet points that the students must include when creating their client brief. So we will be looking for those particular headings to be showing in the students' work, and then from that we'll be looking at the detail of which they write them in for scoring their work. The concept sketches, again, it shows you the kind of things that we were expecting them to produce for the concept sketches. Now, if we have a look at the actual student work, before you get to student work, we do provide an appendix that shows some of the details about the client and the client's needs to support them when coming up with their designs. We provide them with some details about location photographs to help them if they're looking at aesthetics of their design as well. So we're now looking at a piece of high quality student work. Again, one of the things we're looking for here is we're looking for the headings that have been outlined in the task list, and then we're looking at the detail in which they respond to those headings. I will share some marking bands with you in a little bit, but when looking at that particular piece of exemplar work, we did feel that the students showed comprehensive and had applied to their knowledge comprehensively to the client and to their client's brief, and were marked full marks. When looking at the drawings, the 3 drawings that this particular student created was a bird's eye view of the plot of land showing the shape and location of the house, of the structure within the plot of land. They provided us with a floor plan of the building that showed clearly where the doors, where the windows, where the different rooms were, the uses of the different rooms, etc., along with the spatial requirements and the movement around the house. And they provided us with a frontal elevation of the property. So there were the 3 drawings that the student provided, and this again was deemed as high quality work. It was deemed that these were comprehensive designs that clearly demonstrated and showed what the student's idea was, and they matched the client's brief. They didn't produce any 3D drawings, okay? They didn't produce any 2-point perspective or isometric drawings of the house, but that's not the requirement anymore. They may have wanted to do that. Other students may provide us with isometric or 2-point perspective drawings and also be awarded full marks. But we felt that these 3 drawings did sufficiently and comprehensively meet the client's brief. So my point to make here is the students aren't limited to use one particular type of drawing. They can use a range of drawings that suit and display their designs as suited. I'm just going to stop sharing that. I'm going to return to my presentation. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. I want to now look at applying the marking and applying the marking grids. So this is your assessment decisions for the Pearson set assignment briefs, and we are using a best fit approach. We're using a 12 mark per grid, and there are, I apologise, there are 3 marks per mark band. It is compensatory, and they do not align to past merit and distinction. For example, one of the mark bands looks like this. This is taken from the component 2, and this is where a student could achieve up to 12 of the 60 marks for being able to produce a practical construction outcome. We're using the limited, adequate, good and excellent Bloom's kind of leveling criteria. For example, you may feel that a student has completed all of the 3 bullet points in the 10 to 12 mark section. You may feel that they have had excellent demonstration of practical skill and have done all 3 of those bullet points, at which point you'd be awarding them 12 marks. You may feel that they've done all 3 of those bullet points within the mark band 4, but not quite all of them to that excellent standard. So you'd be looking at 10 or 11 marks. You may feel that a student has done 2 of those 3 bullet points, so maybe they have got a finish and appearance that is completely clean, maybe they have got a finished product that is fully compliant, however not all of their dimensions were within tolerance. So you would then now be looking at the best fit approach. Do you then feel that they have enough to sufficiently award them 10 marks, or are you going to then drop them down to maybe the 9 or 8 marks into mark band 3? It's the best fit approach that you feel where the student is going to be placed. One of the things to note is obviously this is only 12 of the overall 60 marks for component 2. The student may perform excellently on this component. They may on this mark band, but they may perform very poorly on one of the other mark bands and only get maybe 1, 2 or 3 marks. Under the old BTEC first, well, that would mean that overall grade was limited by maybe the pass level work, even if they had produced some distinction level work in another area of that assignment. That's no longer the case. The overall score from the mark band is added together, and that will become a score that you would submit for that component to the exam board, and at which point we will then go through a moderation and grade boundary process, and you will get a mark based upon an overall component score. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a little bit. I have here a second example. This is taken from component 3. Again, similar best fit approach system works. We're using the limited, adequate, good, comprehensive keywords to level the work up in each mark band. You again might think that they have comprehensively demonstrated and communicated their concepts. They've completed all 3 of those bullet points in mark band 4 to the highest of levels, a very clear 12 marks. However, you may feel that they have got complete clarity in graphical technique, a high level of control, but they have only mostly clearly annotated their work. So you've now got 1 bullet point in mark band 3, 2 bullet points in mark band 4. So you're looking at, again, at a best fit approach. Do you feel that overall their work is a 9, or do you feel that overall their work is a 10? And it's the best fit approach that you're then using at that point. Moving on to resubmission and evidence of retakes. Okay, after you have marked this learner work, you then may take the decision to allow the learners who have not achieved their expected potential to resubmit work. So they are then allowed 15 days to resubmit. Resubmission will apply. You are at this point allowed to give general feedback to tell the learners the areas that need to be worked on, but you are not allowed to give any specific or decision-making instructions. So very generalized feedback, nothing specific can be given. After this process, you will then submit your mark to the moderator. So for example, if you are doing the October release Pearson set assignment brief, you would allow the students their supervised time, you'd give them feedback, allow the resubmission, and then at that point you would submit your marks in the December period for the moderator. If necessary, learners are permitted to retake an internal assessment once this system is finished. So if you've done the October Pearson assignment brief, you've student marked it, the students have resubmitted it, and you have submitted the marks to the moderator in December. The moderator will then give you some feedback. You'll get that in approximately January, and you then may decide that the student could actually have performed better. So you would then retake those students with a new Pearson and set assignment brief. So you might make them do the Pearson and set assignment brief the following year or in the following session. One thing to be wary of at this point though if a student retakes a Pearson set assignment brief, the most recent grade counts, not the highest grade. So if on their first attempt they got a merit and you felt that they could get a distinction if they retook it, however they only got a pass, then it's the pass that counts. It is the most recent grade counts, not the highest grade. The moderation process, how will this work? Well, the moderator will complete their moderation and they will then provide feedback directly to you. It will be approximately 2 weeks at this point that you'll have to revise your marks. So we'll give you some moderated information. If we feel that your marking is out, we'll give you 2 weeks to moderate your marks. After this 2-week period, we'll then have a look at the modifications you've made. We'll either uphold those marks, or if you feel that your marks are not within tolerance of national standard, then Pearson will apply an adjustment. Moderation is all going to be done remotely, so you'll have to upload all their work to the Learn and Work platform. The sample size will be determined by your cohort. If you have 10 learners, all 10 learners will be sampled. If you have 10 to 100 learners, a random sample of 10 will be sampled. Your random sample of 10 students will be sent out to you. If the highest and lowest marking students are in that random sample of 10, your sample will remain at 10. If the highest and lowest graded work is not in that sample of 10, you will also be required to upload to the Learn and Work transfer system the highest and lowest students' work. So you may actually end up being sampled for 12 students, because it will be the random 10 plus the highest and lowest. If you are submitting component 2 and component 3 for sampling for moderation at the same time, then they will be moderated by the same moderator, but both will be sampled. There'll be 2 opportunities for moderation, which I'll outline to you in a minute, and there will be set deadlines of which you need to upload marks to. Again, I'll outline those in a minute. One thing that is important to note when you're uploading grades to the Learn and Work system and you're uploading the grades to the gateway, rank order of students' work is going to be really important. So when the moderator moderates the work, they'll look at whether they agree your marking. They'll also look to see if you've marked it and submitted work that is in a correct rank order. If it's not, that could lead to further sampling that is required. The idea of moderation is it is now going to reduce the amount of workload that you are required to do. Some of the quality assurance that is taking place, well, obviously you will now no longer need to internally verify assignment briefs because you are now using Pearson set assignment briefs. That internal verification has been completed by Pearson. Moderation replaces standards verification. So again, there will no longer need for standards verification, and no longer a need for internally verifying assessment decisions, etc., because moderation is replacing that. QA forms are being updated on the gateway at the moment. In fact, you can go onto the Pearson gateway, you can download a learner assessment sheet that you would need to fill out for each learner for submission. You can also download an Excel spreadsheet that has been designed to support you in tracking your learner grades to make the tracking of learner work simpler. And both of those are available now on the Pearson website. The external assessment, well, very little has changed on the new Tech Award. Approximately 80% of the content from the BTEC First is carried over to the BTEC Tech Award, but there is some new content which you do need to be aware of. It is terminal. What I mean by that is the students must have completed component 2 and component 3 before they do the component 1. So it must be the last thing that they do. In theory, you could do component 2 and component 3 in years 10 and early parts of year 11, and then you could actually sit them for the external exam in the January session of year 11. And if you are happy with the grade that they get for component 1, that's your students done. They then have that time for the remainder of year 11 to be focusing on other subjects. Or you may decide that you're not happy with their grade and you could resit them in the May version of the exam. But it has to be terminal. It is the last thing they do. They must have completed component 2 and 3 first. It's a formal assessment. I'll detail in a second details about the actual exam and content. There are certain times at which you can do it. I'll show you some examples of question time, and it is under high control, so it is exam conditioned invigilators. There is no minimum grade outcome for the exam to get the qualification, so if they do score 0 in the exam, but they've taken it, well, that's acceptable. It's expected it will take 48 hours to deliver the content, and it is worth 40% of the final grade. There are 60 marks available for the exam. It will take about 1.5 hours, and it will be available in January and May of each year. The first time your students will be able to sit the exam will be January 2024. This is because it is a terminal exam, so it is expected that components 2 and 3 will be completed during year 10, and the first time that they can sit and the first time you can award on this course will be January 2024. The exam will look at different forms of construction, and it will only look at low rise. It will look at different types of built environment, including offices, retail and homes. It will also have a greater focus on things like prefabrication and environmental sustainability. They will have to have an understanding of how sites are set up. It will also look at things like substructure, different types of foundations, and how water is removed and how we can control water on a building site. It will look at superstructure and different methods of building a superstructure. We'll also be looking at aesthetics and comfortability of a home and how that is built into the design of a home. Students will be expected to have an understanding of walls, floors, roofs and external works. They're expected to have an understanding of different construction methods that can be used to build a home. Before I move on to the next stage, I am just going to stop for a second and move over to the exam. So here's an example of component 1 exam. You will see that the layout of the exam is very similar to the BTEC first. It will start with multiple choice or an easy entry question, but it then will build up to some more complex 2-marking questions, short answer questions that will ask them to explain and justify. This particular exam is available on the Pearson website. We will retain some of those graphic detail questions that the students are required to know. Some of the graphic detailed drawing questions will also still be evident. Some more detailed extended writing questions. There will also be some 6 and 8 mark extended writing questions where the students will be expected to do things like discuss and compare and evaluate. And again, finishing off with a 9 mark or 6 mark extended writing question towards the end of the exam. The content wise, just to show you that a lot of the content is similar from the old BTEC first, but there are some differences that do need to be looked at carefully. So you will be able to repurpose a lot of your BTEC first resources, but there are new things that need to be included. For example, under sustainability, and this comes from the specification, something that didn't used to be there is things like use of water segregation. That's new to the new specification. Moving down a little bit further with regards to structures and how buildings are built, the use of portal steel frames and skeletal frames, that wasn't in the old BTEC first. New content there again. So I recommend that if you are coming from the BTEC first onto the Tech Award, you take the time to map across what you can reuse, what you need to get rid of, and what you need to produce as new content, because there is definitely some new content within the new course. I'm just going to go back to my original presentation, just bear with me a second. Okay, assessment availabilities. So Pearson set assignment briefs will be available in early October for components 2 and 3. And then those components will be completed during the October, November, early December, and you'll be submitting your scores on the 15th of December. It will be moderated in January, and results will officially be sent out in March. There's a second series of Pearson set assignment briefs that will be released in February. They will be expected to be completed during February, April, and May. You'll be uploading your work on the 1st of May, uploading your scores on the 1st of May, of which it will then be moderated. The results will then be released on the National GCSE and BTEC Results Day in the summer, in August. Some possible delivery models you might want to use. If you're delivering a standard course without any research opportunity, you might want to consider this version where you deliver components 2 throughout the majority of the first year and submit it in the April window. You'll then start delivering component 3 at the end of the first year, and then continue it in the second year, so doing the October assignment, and then prepare them for the summer exam during that January to May time, constantly drip feeding some of the component 1 information throughout. There is no opportunity for reset built into this particular structure, so if you're confident of your students' ability, it might be one to use. A second option builds in some reset opportunity where you deliver component 2 in year 1, and then you start delivering component 3 in end of year 1 and start of year 2. But you put them in for the component 1 exam in the January window, February-January window. If you're not happy with the grade of the students getting component 1 exam, you've then got that option to prepare them and then resit them in the summer exam series in May. Be wary of the fact that the highest grade counts. So if they get a merit in January but only get a pass in May, it's the pass that counts, not the merit. It's the most recent grade counts, not the highest grade. Some centres are delivering it with more than one teacher, so you may have a delivery option like this where you have one teacher delivering component 2, another teacher delivering component 3, allowing you that ability to deliver both components at the same time. And it also builds in an opportunity to do component 1 and have some component 1 reset and revision time. So that might be one option. And we are also aware that some schools are now moving over to a 3-year Key Stage 4. So we have that option of where you could do a component in year 1, which would be year 9, and then another component in year 2, and then a third component in the final year. So there's a 3-year structure you might want to consider using there as well. As for grading, learners must sit and achieve an outcome on all components. So you must upload grades for all components. You must upload grades for component 2 and component 3, and they must set the component 1 exam. However, a 0 grade is still an entry. There's still evidence that they have sat it, so they can actually get an unclassified. You will upload raw marks for each component. We will then convert that into a UMS, and this will be converted using a grade boundary system. And that grade boundary will not be defined until after the components have been done. And that grade boundary will vary on each series. Hence the reason you cannot tell the students if they've got a pass, merit, distinction while they're doing the work, because you don't know that, we don't know that until the work is submitted, post-moderation, and the grade boundaries have been set. Internal components will then be graded on a 6 grade scale, starting from level 1 pass, level 1 merit, level 1 distinction, level 2 pass, level 2 merit, level 2 distinction. There is no ability to get a level 2 distinction star at component level. The overall qualification will be graded on a 7-point scale, grading from level 1 pass. We now have the inclusion of level 1 merit and level 1 distinction, which was never there before with the old BTEC First, so a benefit to those students that are performing lower down in the grade system. There is also the level 2 pass, level 2 merit, level 2 distinction, level 2 distinction star. The final grade will be an aggregate of their UMS score, and I'll share with you some of the grading of how their UMS score converts to a grade in a minute. Level 2 distinction stars will only be awarded to learners that have achieved a level 2 distinction on all 3 components. Not only must they achieve a level 2 distinction, but they also must meet a minimum UMS score as well. So there will be some students that get all level 2 distinctions, but still don't get a level 2 distinction star. They have to get level 2 distinctions, and they have to get them at a high level for it to be converted into a distinction star. An example of the component scores are here. So these are the UMS scores, not the scores that you submit. We will give the components a UMS score. Those UMS scores are then added up to then convert into an overall grade. This grid is available in the Pearson's in the specification, so I recommend you take a bit of time reviewing the UMS scores and how it converts to grades. How will the new assessments benefit the learners? Well, as I've said before, this is compensatory, so students may now perform towards the lower end on one part of an assignment and towards the higher end on another part of the same assignment, and they're no longer restricted to that lowest grade anymore, because they've got a little bit of low level work, some high level work, and their high level work will bring that grade up. There's no longer a minimum grade requirement. Now, this is more relevant to those of you coming from BTEC, the previous BTEC Tech Award. However, this is construction. We're jumping from the BTEC first to the new BTEC Tech Award. So this isn't quite so relevant to us. They can get an unclassified in a component, but even if they do, they will still be able to get an overall grade. So they might fail one component, but still collect together enough points to be converted into a grade. What's unique to BTEC Tech Awards is the moderation process that includes direct feedback. So when you've completed a component, you will get some feedback from a moderator that will tell you how you've done, to allow you to make decisions before the qualification finishes about whether you want student to retake a component again. That's not there with the GCSEs. It's something that's unique to BTECs, something that is hopefully going to help you decide different steps to take after each component is completed. There is a timeline for development of this course, and we're currently at this September 2022 area, where centres are now starting to deliver this course. We will expect to have the first submission of component grades in the December 2022, and in January 2023 we'll be able to be issuing the first component grades, and we'll also be updating the gateway with some further exemplar material now the first run through will have been done. The first full grading of the course, certification of the course, will be happening in January 2024, when the students have sat that exam for the first potential time. Final registration for students on the BTEC First Award is summer 2023. So anybody that is doing in year 11 doing the course now should be on the BTEC First Award. If you have got year 10 students, they should now be enrolled onto the Tech Award if you are wanting to be Progress 8 compliant. There is a number of ranges of support for delivery. We have some teacher delivery guides on the Pearson Gateway. There's some transition tables that will help you map from the previous course to the current course. We have sample assessment material. We have exemplar material that you can download from the Gateway. Results Wizard and Results Plus will be available on the day of results. We have some marker training taking place. The next session is taking place on the 22nd of November 2022, where we will be looking at marking and moderation, and that will also have a recording which will be put online in the near future. And you also have access to our Pearson subject advisors and some paid resources. Our Pearson subject advisor for construction is Everin. You can contact him at the email address online. You can also find his details on the Pearson Gateway, and he'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the BTEC Tech Award construction. One of the best ways I feel that you can get yourself engaged and trained within the Tech Award is to take part in as part of one of our assessment associates. We are currently looking for assessment associates for the BTEC Tech Award to be moderators and to be examiners. We're also looking for people who may want to be involved in the BTEC Level 3, and we're also looking for people who maybe want to be involved in the T-Level, all of those as either standards verifiers, moderators and examiners. And there is a link on screen you can use to express your interest in that. It's a really good way to get access to some resources, really good way to get access to senior members of the assessment team for advice, and to see what other centres around the country are doing to get a bit of a bigger feel about what resources will be produced and what the students are creating. Also, it is paid, so it's quite nice to have that additional income as well. In conclusion, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time to watch this presentation. Please have a check of our frequently asked questions section if you do have any further questions, or contact Everin and he will be able to also answer any of your questions. Thank you very much and goodbye.